Good day, everyone. My name is Craig King, Director of Teacher Leadership with the Palmetto State Teachers Association. I'm so happy that you have joined us for this very important conversation about race and public education. I have with me some phenomenal panelists representing different fields of public education and education as a whole. We're going to have some very candid conversations today. We're going to have an open dialogue about race, about public education, about the importance of African American teachers in our public schools. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure that you hit that share button so we can share this conversation with as many people as possible. So we're going to get started with some introductions. I'm going to allow our panelists to introduce themselves, and I'm going to start to my left with Zoanne Stokes.
Hello, I am Zoanne Stokes. I am on the board of PSTA. I am the media specialist at Pinehurst Elementary School in North Charleston, South Carolina.
My name is Mansa Joseph. I am the Assistant Principal of Instruction at Irmo Middle School in Lexington Richland School District 5.
I'm Nakina McKnight, PSTA President and CTE Instructor at Andrew Jackson High School in Kershaw, South Carolina.
My name is Kenny Smith, and I am the Nutrition Coordinator at Adventure Children's Museum, and we specialize in children from 4K to middle school.
Well, thank you so much, guys, for the great introduction. I'm looking forward to some of the dialogue that we're going to have today. Very important work that each one of us that we do for public education in South Carolina. And so I'm going to jump in with our questions. We won't be here long, but we just want to have a really honest, open conversation about these important topics. So we've seen a lot in the news recently and over the past few years as it relates to law enforcement and African Americans. And I want you to be able to share some of those experiences that you've had and how they have affected you, not just as a person, but as an educator in public schools in South Carolina. So let's start with Mansa.
Sure. And I'm going to start with saying this. Not all law enforcement is going to have a negative story attached to it. So I do want to address that, just starting this conversation. I have a really close friend of mine who I speak to every single day almost, who's in law enforcement, and he shares some of his stories. I know it's a tough job.
Absolutely.
I know it's a lot of stress and a lot of strain that's put on those ladies and gentlemen who are out there doing the work. But much like teachers, there's still an expectation that's there. There's an accountability that's there that we as citizens are looking and saying, hey, look, you're here to protect and serve, and that's what we expect. I'll tell you, one thing that's happened to me recently, it was a couple years back, but that really challenged my thinking about law enforcement, especially as it relates to education, was that I was in school. One of our resource officers, I won't say his name, but he was laughing and joking, and he took his phone out, and he had a picture, and he showed me the picture of the gentleman, light-skinned guy, shorter than me, but he felt the need to say, hey, this guy kind of looks like you, and laugh about it. And I didn't laugh. I went ahead and filed a complaint and pushed that along, but it made me really think about how he, as a resource officer in the school, who's supposed to be there to help protect and serve and be that figure of what law enforcement is, and that's a key role in schools. Or resource officers can do so much good, and I've seen them do good.
Absolutely.
I've seen them talk to kids, really get kids to understand that, hey, this is the expectation, this is what you can be, and help grow them. But his bias showed in that moment, and it worried me for how he might respond to our children that might look like me if he's responding to me as a school employee.
Right.
That way.
Yeah. And thanks for sharing that, Mansa. And I'm glad you prefaced your comments with what you said, because, all of us probably have family members and friends that are in law enforcement, and they do a phenomenal job. They do When we are in need of services, that's who we call, and so we want to make sure that we highlight the great work that those great police officers do. But it's also important to highlight some of the instances that happen in our lives that negatively impact us as African Americans. Kenny, do you want to share anything?
Sure. I actually had a situation, I think it was maybe 5 years ago now, where I was riding down 277, y'all know where that is, and right as it comes into the city, it turns into Bull Street. And so I was just kind of riding, and I got to a stoplight, and it's a 3-lane road. Bull Street is 3 lanes. So I was in the far right lane, and the cop was in the far left lane. So we were both at the same light. I pull off, and I notice he crosses over 3 lanes. And once he gets behind me, he pulls the blue lights on me. Now, we were just at the same light. I had gone 100 feet. And so I know I wasn't speeding. I didn't make any turns or anything like that. So he pulled me over. I kept going until I got to Confederate Avenue. Go figure. I made a right on Confederate Avenue, and that's when he got out the car, came to my window, and he said, "Do you know you didn't put your signal light on?" I said, "I didn't make a turn." He was like, "Can I see your license, your proof of registration, your all that, and your insurance information?" So in South Carolina, you can show your insurance information through your phone, digitally. And so that's what I was getting ready to show him. He was like, "I don't want to see that." I was like, "Well," I told him, I said, "in South Carolina, I can show it digitally." And so he said he was going back to his car. So he went back to his car. Before he ever came back, there were 3 or 4 other, state troopers that ended up coming around my car. So I'm like, what's going on? At this point, I'm just like, I know it's about to be a situation, but I don't know why. I don't know why it would take that many people. I had on my work shirt, so my company Adventure, I had that on. And that particular morning, I actually had a taping that I was doing with the mayor and some people from my job for a Let's Move initiative during that time. And so they were waiting on me. They didn't know I had been pulled over. No one, my family, my wife, nobody knew. So as the police get out the car, they come to both sides, one on this side, one on this side. So they look, and I had just left the bank, so I had some open cash sitting on my front seat. I had 2 cell phones.
Oh, man, not 2.
You know how it looks, right? So I had 2 cell phones. One was a work phone, one was my personal.
Yeah.
And then I had a laptop. I had about $800 cash just in an envelope, but it was open out, so you could see it. Then the cop on this side says, "Hey, where did you get the money from?" I said, "From the bank." It was in the bank envelope. So then they were like, "Step out of the car." And I asked why. He was like, "Don't ask any questions." So what am I to do? It's 5 cops around. So I get out of the car. They take me around to the back of the car and handcuff me. So I'm just sitting there, and now they're searching my car illegally. They took my laptop, slammed it on top of the car hood. Eventually, I found out it was broken. Of the $800 that I had, I only got $200 of it back after they released me from jail. So they took my cell phones. I only got one of those back. All of this stuff happened. So then they put me in a police car. They arrest me, and I'm still trying to figure out why to this day. Put me in the back. They take me to Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center. As I'm getting out of the car, I'm like, "Hey, man, the cuffs are really tight." Like, they were really tight. And so he said, "Hold on." He came behind me and tightened them. So they go in, they book me. And aside from me being an educator, I sing. And so as I'm...
Sing pretty well, too, my dad.
I'm okay. So, I have, like, music out and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And so I guess once you're doing the booking process, there's a nurse that kind of has to check you physically and all that kind of stuff. And so this particular nurse saw me, and he was like, "Man, what are you doing here?" I didn't know him, but he knew of my music. He was like, "Man, what are you doing here?" I said, "I wish I knew." So I told him the whole story. And what they don't tell you is when you go to jail and they let you make that one phone call, it can't be to a cell phone. It has to be to a landline.
Did y'all know that?
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
So when
Did y'all
I get
know
in,
that? Drop the comments. Did y'all know that?
I had
That's
no
new.
idea. So I'm thinking like I don't know any landline numbers other than my grandmother, and she's 82. She's not gonna pick up the phone, especially if she doesn't know the number.
Right.
So at this point I'm like, I can't even call anybody. Nobody knows where I am. I'm in jail. I've never been to jail before. People are looking at me funny because
Yeah.
I mean it was probably looked like what is he doing? You know what I mean?
Right.
So the nurse comes over, like I said, and he says, what are you doing here? I said, I wish I knew. And I said, I can't even make a call. So he said, hey, come in my office and make a call. I looked in his office, and on his desk was my CD, just sitting on his desk. Wow. So I was like, thank God for that. So he let me make a call. I made the call, but because I made it so late, I missed the first court appearance. Because I guess you can do like you get to see the judge twice a day.
Right.
Like early in the morning, like 9, and then at like 4 or 5, right before it's done. So now I'm stuck in here the rest of the day until the later one. So in between that time, one of the inmates saw that I got to make this phone call, and he didn't. Then they asked me if I wanted they give you like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and some juice. I said, I don't want that. And I didn't mean it in a way that was like, it'll get away from me. But at that point, I'm in jail.
Right.
I'm missing my meetings.
Right.
They broken my computer, so I was mad. You know, so when they asked me did I want it, I said, I don't want that. And I guess this guy saw it. So he was already mad that I made the phone call.
Yeah.
Now he's mad that I didn't want their food. So he charged at me. He just ran from where he was and he charged at me. So the officers tackled both of us. And now I'm in solitary confinement. Now I'm in a separate cell, and I can't even communicate with the nurse to try to find my way out of this situation.
So, wow.
Yeah, it was a lot, man.
So the emotions attached to those experiences, and I know these are just 2 experiences out of many that you may have experienced or whatever. Those emotions that come with that, Zoe and Nikina, if you can share, how do you feel hearing those stories, and maybe even some personal anecdotes if you want to add?
Well, it really just makes you upset that you never knew why you were even arrested. And anytime we look at it and we see our males being detained by officers, it's a scary situation. But these officers, we don't really know what they're looking at, because when I was in Sumter and I lived off the frontage road and I was getting ready to go to work, and I think back then I had just got my hair cut off to be natural, so I had like a scarf, a black do-rag on my hair before I got to work, because I wanted to keep my edges down. And so I was in a white little Mazda truck back then, and getting ready to go to work. I know I wasn't speeding, because I don't speed. I've only had 1 ticket my whole entire life. So I was going to work, and a cop pulled me over, and I'm just like, what is he pulling me over for? So he comes up, and I could see the surprise on his face, because he actually didn't realize that I was a woman. He came up and he was like taken aback, and then so he was just like, hey, did you know your lights aren't on? And I said, my lights? He said, yeah, your lights are supposed to be on, but the sun was coming up. I said, no, I didn't know they weren't on though. He was like, okay, can I have your license and registration? And I gave it to him, and then he came back and he was like, well, I'm just gonna give you a warning and let you go on your day. And that whole day really messed me up, because I was going to work to teach, and I just kept thinking, why did he really pull me over? Because I could tell as soon as he came up there that he didn't have a real reason to pull me over. But in the back of my mind, I knew it was because I had a do-rag on my head, and from afar, I probably looked like a guy. And he just in a little white truck, but still, why would you pull somebody over? And it's like, we really need that training. And that's what we're looking for accountability. Just like teachers, officers need to be held accountable, and they need to be trained a certain way so that they can overlook the stigma, the racism of just pulling someone over just because of the color of their skin. There's no reason.
Or wearing a do-rag.
Yeah, and just because I have a do-rag, because it all goes back to the thoughts behind someone who's wearing a do-rag and what it looks like and maybe where they're coming from at this time of the morning. And it shouldn't be something like that. And we shouldn't have to be afraid to pull over. But I've always been taught I am never pulling over until I'm at a place where there are people around and I feel safe. So I will drive with my hazards on whenever a cop is behind me until I'm at a certain spot. But I shouldn't have to feel that way because they are supposed to be there to protect and serve. But who are they protecting and serving?
Thank you for sharing that, Zoanne. I recently made a post on social media about, I guess 2.5, 3 months ago about they showed the scene from Family Matters when Eddie Winslow was racially profiled. I mean, it's amazing how some of those old shows touched on so many different topics.
Absolutely.
But it talked about Eddie and how he got racially profiled by these two cops, and it just made me realize my experiences of being pulled over. And I had a really good friend of mine comment and said, Craig, I can't believe that someone would racially profile you because of, you do all these positive things in the community. And I said, that's good, but it shouldn't matter if I do positive things in the community or not. I shouldn't be harassed or profiled because of the color of my skin. And so it has happened. I remember one time where I was driving home. At the time I had a white BMWs with some rims. Don't hate. And I was driving home from church, Green Hill Baptist Church, where they were having a youth revival down in Clarendon County, where I'm from. And when I got home, I remember my mom just having this look on her face. And so one of her other friends had like a police scanner or whatever, and they heard that they ran the plates for the car, and that, they wanted to check it out because I guess I wasn't supposed to be driving a BMW with rims or whatever. And I didn't get pulled over, but I remember the cop being there, and they just ran my plates for whatever reason. I didn't get stopped, but I guess seeing that there was a reason, whatever. But, things like that, I shouldn't have to say, hey, I, support children with cancer, or I am an education advocate, and all these things, that benefit of the doubt, I think sometimes that aren't given to African Americans is a really big part of the problem. So, Nakina, you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think the only thing is, speaking about getting pulled over and whatnot, I just always know whenever a cop does pull up beside me, I'm automatically at 10 and 2. And I'm literally putting my fingernails I'm holding the wheel so hard, with the fear of that I may be doing something wrong, even though I'm not. And that's just not fair. We shouldn't have to live our lives in fear driving from Adventure to State Street, to the gas station. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, that it is a fear. It is a fear, and we should not have to live like that at all.
So, just tapping into those emotions that we just shared individually and collectively, as it relates to our public education system, if you had to speak to some of your colleagues right now and some of those that are teaching classrooms full of African American boys and girls, what would you say to those educators that are teaching those black and brown boys and girls in those classrooms? What tips or advice or just feedback would you give them?
Can I start this off? Because I'm in a small town. My school is in a small town, and so if I could give any advice at all, it would be to teach our brown babies like you teach everyone else, but learn about them. Learn what they like. Talk to them, make a relationship. I think what part of the problem is sometimes for our white teachers, they're afraid to make relationships because they are afraid that they're not going to understand what black children need and what they talk about. I mean, they're just like everyone else. They have needs also, but you have to meet them where they are. So you can't start over here if they haven't gotten there yet, especially if you haven't taken the time to see why it's taking them some time to feel included with the rest of the class. Because especially for our males, a lot of them have been outcast so much. Sometimes they don't feel safe opening up to someone that does not look like them. But if you show them that you're going to treat them with respect, because for a lot of them, that's what it is. They just want to be treated with respect. If you treat them with respect, meet them where they are, I think the growth can happen. But you have to do your part too.
And it's important to point out there are teachers that are doing that.
Yes,
They're
there are
building those.
definitely teachers that are doing that.
So there are teachers doing that are building those relationships. Because I'm a beneficiary of some of those teachers that didn't look like me that built those relationships. My favorite teacher in the entire world, Miss Peggy Lester, was my second grade teacher. She was a white female, but she was my favorite teacher in the whole wide world. And that key is that she built those relationships with me and so many other students in the classroom that look like me. So anybody else want to jump on that?
Well, I just wanted to say that, like we were saying, building those relationships are important. And when you are in that classroom, and teachers feel that they have to teach the standards, they have this, and this to do. But if you look at your classroom, and as a media specialist, when you look in your classroom library, what kind of things do you have for your students? How can they see themselves if you don't have anything in your classroom where they can see themselves? And so it is your job as an educator to make sure you have material that is relevant for them. See, some things that is something simple is to make sure that they have something they can see themselves in and to actually learn and read it yourself. Because on Commercial America, what do you see on TV? I know how many Caucasians wash their hair. I know what they do in the daytime. I know what kind of coffee they drink. I know all about them. But can my colleagues tell me how I wash my hair, what I need for my things? They really don't, because it's not commercialized. It's not, they don't see it every day. So you actually have to be intentional. So you have students in your classroom that you have to be intentional with. You can't just say, oh, I want to build a relationship with them, asking them their name and what they like. You have to be intentional. What's in their stores? You might have to go out and see what it's like. One of the most meaningful field trips we had when I first became a teacher was on a bus driving around rural Sumter, learning where my students lived. So I could see what the neighborhood was like, and then be intentional and go to the corner store and kind of see what was around, what they like, so I can build that relationship with them. Because I still have to build a relationship, and I am brown, but I had to be intentional to build that relationship and get to know them and offer them things that they see themselves.
And that's a really important point, because 95% of the students that I taught in Orangeburg did not have a similar upbringing that I had. I had two parents. I never saw my parents, I never witnessed abuse. I never witnessed alcoholism. I never witnessed any of those adverse childhood experiences, those ACEs that we learn about, that many of us know about. I never witnessed any of those things, but that didn't mean I couldn't learn. And so even though I looked like them, my experiences were very different than theirs. So I intentionally had to take the time. So I'm glad you brought up that point, Zoanne, because we have to, for our non-brown and black teachers out there, that's a great point that she made. And, just know that somebody that is a black teacher, I still had to learn about my students and things that they dealt with. So thank you, Zoanne, for bringing that up.
I had a group. I also teach something called Future Leaders, and it's for emerging, middle schoolers that may be at risk for not succeeding. And so they send me across the state. So this last cycle, I was in Hartsville, and that's a part of the corridor of shame. And so these students, their teachers believe that they don't really have much of a future. And so they put them in my program, and my job is to expose them to opportunities, all those different things. And so when they first walk in the classroom, you notice immediately these kids are not going to talk to me. You know what I mean? You feel it, and these are 8th graders, so they're established in their modes of transportation. They know, all right, here you go. So I did this thing, and for any teachers, this is a good way to communicate and understand and be able to support them. Kids now have cell phones. I said, now you can't have your cell phone in my class. I said, but I'm gonna buy each one of you a notebook. And in this notebook, you tell me whatever your journal time is, whatever you want to talk about to me. This is your personal text message to me, and I'll respond to you personally. Now, for me, that was a big task because these kids were writing me novels every week, but I took my time and I responded to each of them personally. I found out some of them had kids on the way. They were dealing with abusive relationships. I mean, all of these things that I'm getting from 16 kids, and throughout the year, I'm able to travel with them, take them on field trips and all those different things. But by the end of the year, and we did 2 or 3 cycles of that, and so when the people that are IMLS, interviewed the students a year later, I wasn't a part of the interview, but I got to hear their stories about, what they got from the class, and to hear that those conversations made impact. You know what I mean? And a lot of the times it's just about listening and understanding that kids today need something different than when we were that age. There are common themes when we were that age, but kids now are exposed to so much more. And it's literally just a matter of hearing them, like she said, learning their stories and responding well. Because after you know that information, how you respond can make or break the situation. A lot of times as teachers, we know the playbook of students when they come in the school door. We already know this kid because the teachers talk. But it's when you get this particular student, how you can make an impact on them without paying attention to what all the other teachers have said. Without doing all of that, but really taking the time to invest you and your care and your support in that kid. And I promise you, you will see kids transform that you never thought would. And you will be their favorite teacher, not even realizing, because and a lot of times it's the ones that you thought weren't listening at all. Right. Those are the ones that talk about you years down the line saying, man, I miss Mr. Kenny or Mr. Smith or whatever. Yeah. And so to hear those stories back, and these kids, and for me to still have their journals, and I still look back, it impacted me. Me raising a black son, a black child, I realized through dealing with these other kids, okay, when he gets to this age, I need to make sure I'm doing this. I need to make sure I'm supporting him with this, because a lot of times their communication with their parents is not going to yield that type of information. So we have to understand as educators how important we are. Sometimes we're their only advocate, because when they go home, they don't have it. So it's vital, especially for our black male kids. They are underrepresented in leadership. They don't have an advocate. And even as a black male, I'm still focusing on making sure I'm okay. Right. So pulling those black men along, it's a challenge.
And it's important to have people like you in your position, Manson in his position, and also strong black women in positions as well. Being able to serve as those role models as somebody, hey, I can achieve this. And when you were talking, I just thought about last year I was on the campus of my alma mater, Go Bulldogs, South Carolina State University. And we were doing a professional clothes closet there. We offer free professional attire for first-year teachers and student teachers. And one of my former students, Gabriel, came up to me, and I didn't realize it, but he is a second-year music education major. And when he came in the room, he was like, Mr. King, like, you're the reason why I became a teacher. I still remember filming Friday, was instruction strategy I did on Fridays where they recorded the standards that they learned for the week or whatever. And he just started just spitting out things that I taught them and how I taught them. And it was just like, you just never know. And I had another student who I received one year and he was retained. And so, based on what others would have said, he was going to have a similar year. Yeah. Didn't write him up one time that year, was a phenomenal student that year. And so, you just never know the impact that you have. So
it's all about the relationship.
It's all about those relationships.
Oh,
Yeah.
Fred,
Yeah. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say really quick because we have teachers out there that might not teach brown or black children.
Sure.
It's also important to teach the other children about the culture
Right.
of others.
That's a great point.
Because that is how we build the change. Because the fact that me knowing about another culture can help me empathize with them and understand them and not be afraid when I see someone. If I grow up in a town where there are no brown or black people and I go up to a city and I see someone, it helps me not be afraid of them because I've learned a little bit about their culture. I've learned them
Right.
about them, and they're not all bad. What you see in the media is not all brown or black
Right.
people.
Right.
Yeah.
So it is very important, even if you don't teach brown or black children, to teach other children about all cultures,
Yeah.
so that they can learn something
Yeah.
and then empathize.
Because
with
those
them.
children grow up to become adults, and
Yes,
you know you
right.
want them to be able to have positive interactions with everyone.
Yeah.
Great point.
Yeah, and I've heard a couple of my favorite words here today, and I want to echo those sentiments. Positive relationships matter most when teaching children. You've got to get to know their story, deeper than their name, deeper than where they live. Who are you as a person? You've got to be intentional about it. I love that word because when you're intentional about it, you understand that I am more than my skin color.
Right.
I am deeper than that. You don't have to look like me to make a connection with me.
Right.
You don't have to. You can have experiences, you can have things that you enjoy, that you can make connections with and build that relationship with. And then, much like your own story, then years down the line, you might be able to look back and say, you know what, I like this, but I remember where that love came from.
Yeah.
That love came from that teacher.
So, because we know it matters to see, for students to see people in teaching positions, in administration that look like them, we know statistically there aren't a large number of African American males and female teachers in the classroom. Why do you think that is important to increase that number, and how do we attract more teachers into our profession that look like us?
So I'll start with this one. I am a proud member of the Call Me Mr. program, and we have been doing this for 20 years of increasing the pool of African American male teachers in our public education system. And it's not by accident. It is very, very, very much intentional. When I first got into the program, I didn't know what I was getting into. But I met guys that had this vision who were older than me, who had been through these similar experiences that I had, and they would make those connections with me and explain to me the importance of education, the power of representation, the power of a student, somebody that looks like you, a young person saying, hey, what am I seeing in the media? And, you know, not being able to make a connection of a way out, but then they see you.
Right.
And then you're the silver lining. Then you all of a sudden become the gold. And they may not say it. You know, it might come out in different ways, but then all of a sudden your presence is so vital. And not just for our young African American students, but also are the students who don't look like us, because they need to understand that, hey, look at this, and I'll speak for myself, look at this African American male, or it could be African American female. Look at this person who is representing themselves well, holding themselves accountable, carrying themselves in such a way. I am not afraid of you.
Right.
I see you, and now I can respect you because I can see now that you're not a threat, he's not a threat, she's not a threat.
Right.
And so it's powerful in two different spaces for our children to see a role model, to see an example of what success for them could look like, and then for them to understand that, you know what, this person's okay with me being me, and then allowing them to be creative and be whoever they want to be, but being that representation, being that person there that's going to say, hey, it's okay, what is your goal, what is your vision, who do you want to become? I'm going to help you see that, set goals, help you get there.
Huge. Anybody else?
When Mansa was talking, I thought about my brother. He just passed his praxis in agriculture. He just turned 33 I hope I got that right. But anyway,
He'll let you know.
yeah, he will definitely let me know. But you don't see a lot of black farmers, and I mean this. He can take a plant and do some wonderful things with it. But I think if he would have gotten into or known about the Call Me Mister program, because I'm not sure if it had started at South Carolina State when he was there, because he's a Bulldog as well.
Yeah, it started.
So I'm not exactly sure, the actual year of it, but I think if he had gone through that program, it would have built him a little more. So I actually think that Call Me Mister program is a wonderful program. And if we can direct our males into, a school where they have the program, I really believe we can get a lot more male teachers with programs like Call Me Mister.
And I think it's important. So if you do a Google search of elementary school teacher, what's going to come up?
A white female.
So, like, I think just seeing that and just knowing that some of our systems and even some of our award programs, sometimes the cookie cutter image of whatever a teacher is supposed to be like. Now, let's be honest, our teachers that are in the classroom, whether they're white, black, whoever, decide to go into public education, hey, I'm all for them. Absolutely. You decide you want to be a change agent for students, I'm all in favor of that. But it's also important that our young brown brothers and sisters understand that this is a profession where you can change lives, that you can make a positive impact. And so and I want to speak to our organizations that award scholarships and things like that. It's important that a teacher may not taught the same way. It doesn't, if a person doesn't score a certain grade, like if you went by my SAT score to base if I was going to be a teacher or not,
Right.
My SAT score,
Yeah, mine too.
I know they changed the scoring. Let's just say my score had 3 numbers. It had 3 numbers, and the first number did not start with a 9 or 8.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Okay.
Mine's either.
I was never a great test taker, but and sometimes even dialect, slang, where you're from, how you answer questions in an interview, all of those things are important. Don't get me wrong, but I think we have to be very intentional about making sure we offer opportunities, for people to get into these programs, because a lot of the people we're looking to attract will be first generation college students and graduates. And so it's important that we look at the systems. And speaking of systems, and we're going to wrap up after this question. So we know systemic racism is embedded in this country in different areas. We know that, right? And, public education is one of those places where sometimes we see systems in place that put people that look like us at a disadvantage. What are some ways that we can combat those systems, which I know is a mouthful? We would have to be here much longer than the time we have, but we're going to end our conversation there. We recognize that it's there, but Zoan, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I'll start. I think we have to be at the table. We can't be afraid to be in leadership roles. We can't be afraid to challenge the things that we see wrong. Working in education and I've always worked at Title I schools. So just starting out, when we see things that we have as far as discipline codes, just different things, we can't be afraid to say something, because just like our fellow sisters and brothers, when they see things out in the street, you can't be afraid to say something. You can't be afraid to let your leadership know these things aren't right because of the way the system is set up. Right. So child A might be having a bad day, they come in, they have an attitude, something's wrong, they mouth off, they get written up, they're in the office, they're going home. Child C comes in, same thing, oh, but I can call her mom and I can talk to her mom real quick and then send her back to her seat. What was the only difference between the students? So we can't be afraid. That's why we do need the mentorship programs. I've always been in a mentor program at whatever school I was in. The last school I was in, we had check in, check out. And there was a student, African American student, that I had taught when she was in first grade, 101, because I was reading intervention. So I had her, I knew what type of student she was, sweet, whenever we're together. Now, let's say she's in 4th, 5th grade, always in office, and I noticed, and I said, why are you in the office? This is not like you. And I'm about to send her home because the teacher keeps doing this, the teacher keeps writing her up. And I just said, let me be her check in and check out. We're talking about it didn't even take 3 weeks for checking in and checking out with me for her not to get written up, not to have, she had bad days.
Of course.
But we went
Like
over
we all do.
some strategies and skills, and I actually went to that teacher. She was not a first year teacher, but first year at our school, and I talked to her, and she said, I'm so glad that you came in and told me how to approach her, because I really didn't know how to approach her. And sometimes it takes that because everyone doesn't understand how to talk to certain people. And it's not that just that she was an African American child, but you know, if you're having a bad day one day and someone's not respecting you the way you think you should be respected, then you just push it off and don't really try. Yeah. But when you have someone that comes in looking from the outside and I'm going, well, this is what I see, and this is kind of how I approach her. And then like, oh, I can do that. I can do that. And then it takes on a different level because it's easy to see a child when you're always thinking about the media and thinking about the bad things. But I tell teachers every day, you start with a clean slate every day. Yet that child might have did something wrong the day before, but we start with a clean slate every day. Everyone deserves that. We've got to start breaking the system where it is. You got to look into those discipline codes and the way the procedures are held. And a lot of teachers like to say, well, they were being disrespectful. And we need to be able to define, well, what is disrespect? What did they do that was disrespectful? Because I know everybody has a different level of disrespect or different things. But if child C did that same thing and I've watched it happen, it wasn't disrespectful. But this child did it, it was disrespectful. So we need to be able to break down those codes and be able to speak up about it, because that's the only way it's going to change.
And would you all agree that in your classroom, when a student is misbehaving or doing something out of character or doing something, whatever it is, 9 times out of 10, it has nothing to do with the teacher. It's something outside of the classroom that's influencing them, and that's where those intentional relationships matter, right? Mansa, where you kind of know what's going on. And Akina, I know you had something you wanted to add.
I was just going to say that, you know, our children and us as teachers also, we just want to be treated fair. Just fair, you know, all across the board. I'm not saying make it easy for us. That's not what I'm saying. But, you know, just treat us like we're worthy. Treat them like they're worthy. I think that's a starting point, you know, to allow us to get better, you know.
Because sometimes those systems that are in place, they are outside of the school and inside of the school sometimes. And as teachers, you have to navigate that, you know, because, you know, obviously we wish a magic wand, hey, systemic racism out of education, out of healthcare, out of poverty, you know, so many things we wish you could do that, but sometimes we just have to navigate that.
And I believe, like, when people ask me about systemic racism, I tell them that systemic racism is essentially laws and codes being developed without your race in mind. So when these things are built from the ground up, that means everything that sits on top of them falls into that category. So everything will be affected because how we were founded as a country was was founded under those
Right.
thoughts. So everything has systemic racism in it, including education, including anything. But I think one of the ways that we as African Americans or people of color can combat systemic racism is three things: community, knowledge, and the eradication of ignorance. Community simply means when one person gets in, hold the door for the next person.
Right.
You know what we do a lot of the times, and I hate to talk about us, but we are always in competition with one another. So we'll get in and we'll slam the door behind us because we feel like only one of us can be there. And what we're doing is playing into the narrative of systemic racism. A lot of people already feel like only one of us can be there. And so we end up in turn just playing along with that, because we feel like, well, now there's competition. There's not. Just do you well and make the space for somebody else. And as a community, we build that thing together. With the thing about knowledge is a lot of times when I grew up, I was from Orangeburg. I just didn't know. I really didn't know certain things, and it took me connecting with different people and me studying for myself. Okay, this is how I do this. This is who I need to be in contact with to get here. This is where I need to go to get here. Call Me Mister was a program at my college too, at Benedict, and I just chose not to be a part of it. Not because I really knew what it was about. I just was like, oh, there they go. You know what I mean? But now, looking back on, I've been in education for 11 years. I'm like, why in the devil was I not a part of this?
Look, let me tell you.
You know what I mean?
Let me tell you, I know why you beat yourself up, because it started at SC State after I graduated. And so I'm an honorary Call Me Mister. You were there. I'm an honorary. I didn't get the blazer, but they gave me a polo. So I get it, man.
And the last part is, eradication of ignorance. I think is our responsibility as educators to ensure that kids that are coming up, that we remove ignorance from their options.
Right.
I want every kid to understand this is an option for you.
Yeah.
You can do this because of this. You have access to this because of this. A lot of times they just don't know. I get kids, it's a privilege for me to work at Adventure for one reason. Because I'm seeing kids from every narrative. I'm not stuck in one classroom in one school district. I'm seeing kids from multiple states. I'm seeing kids from multiple districts. I can in one day have 200 kids in my class.
Wow.
So I'm having some that come from Title I schools. I'm having some that come from school districts that have everything they could ever want in the same day. And I'm seeing the difference in the levels of education from grade levels. I can have a third grade class from this school and a third grade class from this school, and it looks like two different countries, literally. And it's astonishing to see the lack of consistency with what kids are taught. And I'm not just talking black kids.
Yeah.
I have seen a class with all white students not know a thing. And then I've seen a class with all black students, same grade level, be well advanced. So I want us to be able to put, especially our black and brown kids, in the playing field, put them in the game, and we do that by eradicating that ignorance. By exposing them to, like she said, exposing our black kids to other cultures. You should know what a taco is.
Right.
You should know where it comes from. You should know geography, even though they're not teaching it much.
Right.
You should understand all of these things, because not understanding it puts you at a disadvantage. Not just in third grade, but for the rest of your life. And if we took those three things and we started breaking them down within our own community, then we would be able to really attack systemic racism in an effective way, because now we have knowledge to support our movement.
That's good, Kenny. Wrap us up.
I'll say that when we start looking at the system as a whole, we have to understand that we are in a vicious cycle. It seems like we continue to fight. People say, oh, well, we got to change. Then nothing happens. We see it. We see the problem. We've identified the problem. But we're in this vicious cycle. What we need are cycle breakers. We need individuals who are going to stand in the way and break the chains of this cycle. We need teachers to understand that, hey, so how do we address it in the education? We address it by having those uncomfortable conversations. Talking about bias, talking about stereotypes, talking about how do I view the world through my lens because of my story. I'm not blaming you. I'm saying that something along your continuum, something in your life, in your story, has made you view the world in a certain way. And that is the cycle that you're in. We need cycle breakers. We need people to understand. And that's where and how you attract those teachers to kind of go back to the last question, to attract those teachers and maintain that. And the message we push through Mister is that we're going to break those cycles. We're going to break those generational curses. We're going to be the ones in our families, in our communities, the ones that say, okay, enough is enough. I'm going to use education, what I've learned, to help the next generation. I'm going to help other people grow. And whether they're black, white, Hispanic, whatever, I need you to understand to treat everybody like you want to be treated, because the golden rule is the key here. And when people can understand that, when everybody starts getting on board, that's when you're going to start seeing some real change. And it's happening. It's happening. If you pay attention, it's happening. It's happening in small pockets. People are starting to set action plans. People are starting to set goals. People are starting to move. We're beyond identifying the problem. We're now setting goals. The next step for everybody is going to be start taking action. Set action steps and start achieving minor goals so that we can get where we're going. It may not happen in our lifetime, and that is the value of education. That is the beauty of teaching. That is the beauty of what we do, and the responsibility that we have is to take what we're learning, continue to build, pass it on to the next generation, and let them finish the job.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Manson. We all have a story.
To how we got to this point.
And that point that you made toward the end, it is happening. There are groundswells, even in the midst of this pandemic. There are conversations being had. There are, every Monday morning at 7:30, I'm on a leadership call with some leaders from all across the country, and never once have we identified political party, religion, sexual orientation, any of those things. We are just there doing the work. We're looking at, hey, this is a problem in our society. What are some ways that we can address some of those issues and find real solutions? And so it's important that we have those conversations. And to close out, we tackled some really heavy topics today. And I want to thank each of you for taking part in our race relations panel as it relates to so many different topics, including public education. But I want you to give us one sentence. I know that's hard for a teacher. One sentence. I'll give you at least two to three. Usually when you get that short, you send that short bio when you're about to speak somewhere. 2 to 3 sentence bio, but two to 3 sentence statement on what you are most excited about. I'll give you a couple seconds. Whoever's ready can jump right in.
I am most excited because I will be a media specialist next year. Job change. My school has over 750 students. At my school, there's 70% ESOL population. I will be able to see, as soon as this pandemic is over, all the students in my school will see me, and I will be teaching them all things cultural-wise. I get to work with them. I get to work with their teachers. I get to work with the leadership in my building. So I'm excited because I bring that story to the table at the door to be able to hold the door for the next person. I'm excited because I'm also part of Project Ready, which is in a library cohort with the library world of cultural knowledge. And in Charleston, we are getting ready, like you said, we're breaking those chains, we're opening doors and having those difficult conversations with other teachers. So just be excited to share and open some eyes.
So that was great, Zoanne. That was a run-on sentence. 3 run-on sentences. I'm gonna give that to you.
Thank you.
So, Mansa, your 3 long run-on sentences.
I am most excited that change is happening. And I'm excited that I can see it happening in my son's lifetime. I'm excited to continue the work and work with others who are willing to do the work.
I am most excited that we have some amazing children that are going to come out of everything that has been going on, the things that they are seeing now. and that we're going to have some students who are going to put in some work to do some amazing things going forward into the future. The world better watch out, because we are building some powerhouses. Yeah.
I'm excited to see a false narrative of black boys being uncovered and a new one being projected. I'm excited to see that. All the lies, I'm glad that it's being exposed, that is not who I am. And I'm glad people are seeing all over the world that is not who a black man is. And I'm excited to be one of the people that are showing a different example of what a black man is.
And I'll finish up. I'm most excited about the opportunity through PSTA and through my own community efforts and even my church, the Brook Columbia, to be able to consistently show that positive image of a black male, professional, educator, and I just feel good. And to speak into Mansa and Kenny's point, and even Akina and Zoanne's, I mean, I just feel that there's a positive shift that's going to happen. And if we look in history, when there was resistance, when there was struggle, when there was a lot of what we're seeing in the world now, pandemic and racist acts and things like that, out of those things in the past, you saw something positive. And if we notice, you know, in those times, a lot of the people making that positive change, they were hated. They were, you know, they were attacked. They were assassinated. They were, you know, and so I am excited that so many people, not just black people, but white people and people of different races are joining together for equality, for equity, and liberation of all people. And so that was my 3 run-on sentences. Even though we educated, run-on sentences are bad. I know my mom, who's an English teacher, sorry mom, who taught Mansa. Mansa didn't have 3 run-on sentences, but I want to thank you guys for coming today. I want to thank the Palmetto State Teachers Association, our board of directors, who are classroom teachers, Zoanne and Nakina on our board of directors, who saw the need for this conversation to happen. Thank you for the educators and community stakeholders and parents and everyone that took place watching this video. Thank you so much for tuning in. We look to do more events like this in the future, and we just thank you so much for attending and tuning in. Until next time, Craig King, Director of Teacher Leadership here at PSTA. Have a great night.